Hello, this is Dan Nowman Niswander. Welcome to the Nowman Show and more. And it is my pleasure to announce I have three guests on today's show. And first of all, the Green Party presidential candidate from 2020, Howie Hawkins, and also Larry Alger from Justice News Network.
Thank you.
And James Roguski from numerous websites. Welcome to the Nowman Show. First of all, let's start with questioning of HR1. I know that that's a topic that we wanted to get into today regarding campaign finance. My first question would be to Howie, what is that?
Well, it's a proposal to have a matching funds program for congressional candidates and changing the existing primary matching funds program for presidential candidates. And first thing I want to say is HR1, the voting rights, ethics, anti-gerrymandering provisions, all that should pass. It's crucial because the Republicans are out there trying to suppress the vote. And if they succeed, and we don't preempt that at the federal level, they're doing it at the state level, they're going to rig elections going forward. And so this minority of right-wingers is going to have the power. So that's number one. But within HR1 is a matching funds program, which is a reform that doesn't reform. It makes it nearly impossible for third-party candidates to qualify, as we have in the past for presidential primary matching funds, because it increases by fivefold the amount of money we have to raise to qualify in small donations. And I was the only candidate in 2020 to even apply, because the major party candidates, because there's a cap on how much private money you can spend, it was about 52 million this year. None of the major party candidates wanted to limit themselves to that. But for us, it would have been a nice boost. So we applied. We still haven't got it because they're still documenting our donations.
Wow.
But at least we qualified. But it took us 2 years. It was a particularly difficult year. It was anybody but Trump. Really hard for a third party on the left. But we did qualify. You increase that fivefold, we're probably not going to qualify. And then the matching funds sounds good. You're a little candidate. You get a 6-to-1 match on these small donations. But that increases the disparities between candidates who are publicly funded by 7 times. Suppose you're a presidential candidate, you raise $1 million to qualify in small donations. So you will get $7 million total. And then you're a candidate who say gets $5 million. You will get $35 million. $35 million in total. So the disparity between the lower funded candidate and the higher funded candidate grows from $4 million to $28 million, sevenfold. So that's a problem. And then there are provisions in it that actually increase the power of big donors. For example, the amount that a national party committee can give to a presidential candidate is increased from $5,000 to $100 million.
First of all, folks, it's a 791-page bill. And on page 627, 2A section says the National Committee of a political party may not make any expenditure in the connection with the general election campaign of any candidate for president of the United States who is affiliated with such a party which exceeds $100 million. What does that mean?
The current limit of 5,000 to 100 million.
Wow.
That's a number.
And the big donors give to these national committees. Each party has 3 of them: a national committee, a House campaign committee, and a Senate campaign committee. This year they could give 109,000 and change to each of those committees. So the big guys can give over $300,000. And if they're like Jeff Bezos and people like that, they give to both parties. So it's over $500,000 they could give. And that increases the role of big donors. And what campaign finance reform should do is limit big donors, particularly independent expenditures through super PACs, which are unlimited. I mean, you can give billions and billions if you want. And there's no provision in the legislation to quarantine that. So what I see is a small public campaign financing program, only accessible to major party candidates, on top of the same old mess of huge private campaign financing that's actually enhanced. So it's a reform that doesn't reform. So,
Dan,
what I'm saying is pass HR1 without the matching funds program and come back to campaign finance reform separately. And what I would advocate there is the clean money, clean elections model, like we use now for presidential general elections, where each candidate gets an equal public campaign grant and they don't run on any privately raised and spent money. And all the presidential candidates used that until Obama jumped out of the program in 2008. And after McCain, none of them have used it because it's only, this year is a little over 100 million and they spent billions. I mean, that can be corrected by giving them a bigger grant, given the realities of campaign finance today. And you can generalize that to congressional elections. The states of Maine, Arizona, and Connecticut already have a program like that. And in fact, Joe Biden co-sponsored a bill for that in 1997 as a senator. Progressives used to advocate this program of full public campaign financing. The partial campaign financing and matching funds doesn't change things. It just adds a little public money on top of the corrupt system we already got.
This is how propaganda works. You put a couple of good things in there that everybody goes, oh yeah, I got to have, no gerrymandering, got to have this, that, and the other thing. Let people vote, let people register, all that sort of thing. But the classic phrase is a poison pill, and they add these things in there that the media is not going to present. It's really not for the people. It's definitely for the two parties. So the Republicans will make a stink about certain aspects of it, but they're going to happily appreciate all of the money that's going to come to their party and their candidates. It doesn't set limits where, and I think the 6 times match of we're helping the people who don't need help to infinity and beyond, when if there was some change to it where up until a certain point we would help smaller candidates, because the argument is if you get a $200 donation, small dollar donation, as a candidate, if you get a lot of those and the government was to multiply that times 6, for a total of 7 times as much, now you're paying attention to small dollar donors. And there is a certain logic to it. If it was capped, it's only helping the rich get richer.
Yeah, what is capped is the public funding. You can only raise up to 250 million, including the 6 times match. So that's about, I guess 40 million. And then you'll end up with 250 million. You can't get any more public money after that. So they cap the public money, but not the private money.
So
right, from a presidential candidate, that's a certain thing, but for a congressperson or a senator or whatever, it's really, you did a good job of explaining this. It's taking the disparity and multiplying it times 6 or 7, depending on how you look at it, instead of trying to raise up the smaller candidates, third party, independent, whatever it might be. It's taking the advantage that the duopoly has and just magnifying it.
Well, that's a systemic issue that is, that's part of the whole inequality issue. So to recap here, private spending, it eliminates any private spending limits. It raises the party donations from 5,000 to 100 million. It doesn't restrict super PACs or dark money. And obviously it doesn't change Citizens United or the McCutcheon decision. Right. And then you mentioned something about doesn't restrict victory funds. What are victory funds?
On the dark money, there is a provision to disclose dark money.
There is?
Yeah, and that's before you get to matching funds. It's called the Disclose Act. And so, but the ACLU has a problem with that because some people want to contribute, but they're afraid of getting harassed if it's a controversial issue. So, that's worth debating. I kind of think we need to protect people, and then people need to stand up for what they believe in. But, that can be debated. And then you raised, the other point was the
victory funds.
Yeah, victory funds. These come out of sort of working through the loopholes, and they got magnified by the McCutcheon decision in 2014 and further magnified by a provision in the omnibus spending bill of 2014, which had a lot of crap in it. I got my pension cut because of that bill. But
Really?
anyway, and what that does is enable, you form joint fundraising committees between the candidate committee, the national and state party committees, which increases the limits. You know, right now it's like an individual can only contribute this year or this next cycle, $2,900 for the primary and $2,900 for the general. And then there are limits to what you can give to party committees. But when you combine them, then somebody can aggregate that. So like the Biden Victory Committee, contributors could give over 620,000.
Wow.
And he had fundraisers where you couldn't get in the door unless you're ready to give 500,000.
Exactly.
So this is a way the big donors get to play. And one of the sort of scams in the matching funds thing is it reduces what the little people can give. So now it's 2,900 for the primary and general. That's 5,800 for the whole election in 2022. But now they're going to reduce that in this bill to 1,000. You can't give over 1,000, or your donations won't qualify. You know, in 200 or less for the small donor contributions. So to say, look, we're limiting what you can contribute, but that's just the little people. The big people can give, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars to the party committees and the victory funds, and unlimited millions to the super PACs.
So going forward, what is that? What are the ramifications for any kind of third party? I know there's a people's movement for a third party. I know there's people are talking about that, you know, a cooperative kind of party, democracy at work. The DSA is organizing like gangbusters right now. What does that mean for any kind of possibility of an additional party to challenge Democrats and Republicans going forward?
Well, I think we're going to have an opportunity to work on campaign finance reform because the Democrats aren't going to kill the filibuster. So HR1 is probably going to be dead unless, you know, Biden and Schumer really play hardball with Manchin and Sinema. Otherwise, you know, they're basically keeping the filibuster, hands the power back to the Republicans who can rule from a minority position. And no legislation is going to get through that the Democrats want. So I think that's where we're at. So we probably have time to try to get back to the full campaign financing model that we were pushing back in the 90s. And, you know, those states I mentioned and the presidential general election campaign funds used. But I think the game changer is the movement for ranked choice voting. Because right now, progressives, when they confront an election like we just had, they say, I got to vote for that centrist Biden to stop that far right Trump. And progressives get marginalized. And it's not just those outside the Democratic Party like me, it's those inside. You know,
That's
AOC and them don't have any leverage.
That's right.
Because the corporate leadership says, where you gonna go? You know, you ain't going nowhere. We got you in our pocket. So AOC wants to get on the Energy and Commerce Committee because it deals with Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. And she puts in her application. So the leadership finds Kathleen Rice, a conservative Democrat from Long Island, and runs her against AOC. And the Policy and Steering Committee of the Democratic Caucus, which makes those decisions, voted 46-13 for Rice over AOC. That kind of tells you the balance of forces. They don't have to respect the squad and the other progressives because what are they going to do? They're not going to go to the Republicans. And because of this plurality voting system, they're not going to come to the Greens. But ranked choice voting, I think, is an idea whose time has come. We got it in 6 more cities in the state of Alaska for a total of 38 cities in 2 states. And now there are movements in 20 states right now. I've never seen so much movement on this. And if we can get that enacted, local, state, and eventually national level, then people can vote, you know, who are progressive can vote for the Greens without worrying about the Republicans because they can rank the Democrats second.
So Howie, what do we need to do for HR1 to, what provisions do we need to kill or modify?
Well, the matching funds program, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's Title 4 of the campaign finance section. And that's where it talks about the matching funds program. There's also a pilot voucher program where voters who ask for a voucher, you don't get one automatically, but if you ask for it, you have $25 to spend. on your favorite candidates.
Really?
The problem is it's token. It's so small, it won't make any difference.
Yeah.
The maximum funding over 10 years is, I think, 300 million or 30 million. No, you can't spend more than 10 million in any state. It'll only happen in 10 states. So in a large state, it's just not going to make a difference.
Just first thing that comes to mind, and I know it's a presidential thing, but somebody like Bernie got millions of donations. Scale that down to a Democrat or a Republican who changes their focus. Trump got a lot of small dollar donations, but look at a Green Party. I know Green Party candidates running for Congress in Pennsylvania. It's going to be hard for them to get $1,200 donors. They may get it, but for the Democrat or the Republican that they're opposing, they could go so far past that and get 6 times, and you're leaving the little guy in the dust. And so there's the presentation, and very much to my disappointment, Kim Iverson did a big video on this yesterday, and she fell for it. It's like, oh, this is great. It's going to make politicians look to little guys to get $200. Okay, yeah, but it's just going to multiply their advantage, as Howie says, times 7. So Howie, if you can clarify, it sounds good, but how would that really hurt the smaller candidates?
Well, in Arizona, where they have this full public campaign finance program, you have to raise, I forget the numbers right now, but it's about proportionally, it's about 1/10 of what they're proposing for congressional candidates. If you scaled up the Arizona qualifying threshold to congressional districts, it would be actually $4,000. I said, let's make it 5,000. And so it's about 10%. Now, if the program started at $5,000, you raise $5,000 in small contributions, then you can start getting those small contributions matched. That would be reasonable, and it would let upstart candidates, third party, even within the major party. I'm looking at the New York primary for mayor, and there are 2 women of color running, Diana Morales and Maya Wiley, and all the guys have got them, qualified for matching funds there. And these 2 women have not, even though they're among the front running candidates. So, imagine Shirley Chisholm, when she started out, she wouldn't qualify under this system, in the presidential thing, and, maybe not for Congress. So, if you come from a community that doesn't have a lot of money, and your contacts, your first contributors are not likely to have a lot of money, you're at a disadvantage. Whereas you're in a major party, they have these massive lists, which you can get access to by making a few agreements with the national party on use of the database. And then you have access to all these donors. For upstarts or the Green Party, our lists are small compared to major parties. It just makes it logistically very difficult. If you're a Green congressional candidate, 50,000 would be a good fundraising operation for the whole campaign, let alone small donations and time to qualify for matching funds.
If there was an amendment that said, hey, lower the threshold to qualify, but cap the total amount so that there's a range where you're helping legitimate candidates, but you're not helping the people who don't need help, ad infinitum. They just keep plowing in the $200 donations, and you're just letting them lap the field. It seems like it needs a lower threshold and a cap at some point to stop the runaway of the big parties.
But how actually would you achieve that?
Amendment to the bill.
But how would you get that amendment? We still have to put pressure on the people that would be in that process to even introduce that idea. As we've seen with the $15 an hour minimum wage, Joe Biden gives lip service to it over and over and over again. And the squad could defend it and could make it happen. but nobody wants to really, up to this point, wants to do that. They don't want to
Well-
put pressure on where the pressure needs to be so that that can happen. And this should be a common sense, easy thing to do, but it's obviously not when you have certain powers in play.
Step number one is what we're doing right now, which is just, and thank you, Howie, because you raised my awareness with the stuff that you put out there. previously.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you having done the analysis that you did on your site and on Counterpunch. The actual bill is not in alignment with the presentation. The bill is not for the people, it's for the politicians and for the parties.
That's right.
And
Well, it
it's
always is. They're
awareness,
always
you know.
self-serving.
It's
That's
awareness.
the whole idea, right?
The position I've taken on amendments is just cut the matching funds section out. That's simple, it's understandable, it's a clear demand. And I think we should have campaign finance reform legislation that's separate. And then we can argue about whether it should be partial public funding with matching funds or full public funding with equal grants. And also, in order to make the program not just voluntary, but mandatory, we need an amendment to the US Constitution. There's a We the People amendment that hasn't been introduced to this Congress, but it will be, that would basically end the Supreme Court imposed doctrines that artificial corporations have constitutional rights like natural persons, and that money is speech, not property. And
Citizens United.
Well, it would overturn Citizens United, Buckley v. Vallejo, McCutcheon, and a whole lot of other decisions on the corporate personhood going back to the 19th century. And what that would enable the public to do is fully regulate election campaign finance and enact a full public campaign financing program if that's what we want. So I think that's the longer term goal, because without that, there's no way to stop, for example, unlimited contributions of super PACs for independent expenditures. And that will continue to dominate even if we get the best public campaign finance program we can conceive of. It'll swamp, the public money.
Yeah, till Citizens United is history, we're just swimming upstream against the current.
And that's why organizing is so important. And there's a lot of organizing that's going on with DSA right now. And I see a lot of potential there in growing numbers to put pressure for whatever issue, not just electoral politics. There's all kinds of things. There's a healthcare for all. I'm connecting with people even with DSA in New York City on Medicare for all, healthcare for all. So this is what we have to do is to, in my view, we have to build a movement. We have to create coalitions and bring people together to put pressure, because that's how we got the New Deal, for instance, in the 1930s. We have that as an example that does work, but there has to be pressure from below, coming from multiple groups, multiple coalitions.
Our problem with Congress is they don't listen to the left because they don't have to. And so, they're Greens in Sarbanes' district. He's the prime sponsor of HR1. They've been trying to reach him for weeks to get no response. I'm going on a podcast. Podcaster wanted Sarbanes to come on. She can't even get the staff to respond. So, we're kind of on the outside looking in. And the thing about the New Deal, not only was there a new labor movement, with the sit-down strikes and, disrupting big business and, forcing Roosevelt's hand, there was also a third party movement. There was a movement for a labor party.
That's right.
The UAW and these other unions were saying we want a labor party in 36, the Progressive Party in Wisconsin and the Farmer Labor Party in Minnesota between them had 13 members of Congress, 4 senators, 2 governors. And then you had socialists and labor or labor farmer people elected to all kinds of city councils and county boards all over the country. And Roosevelt was very worried about that. The Democratic National Committee did a national poll, one of the early ones that Gallup did. And it showed that if this Labor Party ran, Roosevelt would lose. So he made moves. That's why we got what they call the second New Deal, which included Social Security, the Works Progress Administration of Public Jobs,
CCC,
National Labor Relations Board, or Act, which legalized unions basically. That was the progressive part of the New Deal. And it was a combination of movement and the threat of a third party.
Howie, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, I have a website. It's howiehawkins.us. And
Okay.
it's, I'm not running for president, but we kept the committee alive and for the next cycle. Call it
we-
Howie Hawkins for the future.
Right.
So we can continue working on these issues.
Right.
And
We
you-
need to build the bridges of coalition.
That's right.
Find common ground between everybody so that we can stand up for what's right. And Dan, how do people find your work?
And you can find me on YouTube, The Nowman Show on the Aurora channel, of course. And then there's also a grassroots channel just called The Nowman Show. If you're streaming around the world, you can watch it in real time each week. It starts the broadcast week on Saturdays at 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. Pacific time on the Aurora channel in the LA area and beyond, cable access, but it's also streaming on Roku, Apple TV and Fire TV. So
Oh,
we're all over the world in real time. So that's how you'll see this show. And you can reach me at Niswander, Niswander on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, even TikTok. I mean, anywhere we can reach people. Jim, get your contact information.
I do too many things, so just go to jamesroguski.com, JamesRoguski.com. I would like to ask Howie a question. It sounded like you were about to as well. Just for clarity, we went over this, but in regards to presidential elections and this HR1 bill, the current situation is such that candidates can receive matching funds if they limit how much private funding they receive. And since Obama, they've said, screw it, we can get way more private money. So we'll pass on the public funding match, which is a 1-to-1 match, I believe. But this bill eliminates that. So now you're going to have presidential campaigns, if this bill was to pass, with unlimited private funding that gets matched by public funding. Am I correct, Howie? I'm looking.
Yeah, the limit is on spending. You can only spend so much on your campaign with your private funds if you accept public money.
And this bill wipes that limit out, my understanding.
Yes. Yes.
That's crazy. This is not getting money out of politics. This is doubling down.
It's doubling down on it and creating the illusion because of eliminating gerrymandering or let's say cross-check or whatever. If that can't be used anymore, it sounds good. But that doesn't mean that it's accomplishing the goal that they want people psychologically to think that it is. And that's how the inequality is set up in our whole system. I mean, in the United States, 20% of Americans own 86% of the wealth now. And, that's insane. I mean, people should be demanding change like now.
Why don't you give your contact info?
okay. I'm Larry Alger with justicенewsnetwork.com. And I want to thank Dan, Howie, and Jim. I appreciate it, Howie. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Howie and Jim and Larry. Also, it's great working with you guys. And I have one more question. And Howie, the details about the Green New Deal are still on your website. Is that correct? People want to go look at that?
Yeah, we have the most developed plan and budget anywhere in the country.
Yep. And
Budget. You can read it on the website.
And all the details that include, a universal health care, a UBI, jobs programs, everything, short-term and long-term solutions. Again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being on the Nowman Show. Always stay present in the moment now.